Hey, what's up everybody? I hope you're all doing fantastic out there. Today here, we're diving into an iconic movie from the 80s, one that I think is still as awesome today as it was back in 1987. It would also be the cinematic introduction to one of the decade's most notable film characters. This is a near perfect movie, but let's dive into 5 things that I think make it lasting and truly great overall.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
Now, the summer of 1987 was an extremely busy one at the movie theaters. Patrick Swayze was Dirty Dancing while Dolph Lundgren gave us He-Man and Masters of the Universe. Bond was back on the screen in The Living Daylights, and Reeves was back in the cape for Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. Robert De Niro played Al Capone in The Untouchables, and Michael J. Fox was giving us the secret of his success. Eddie Murphy was also back at it once again as Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop 2, while audiences also got to see a group of nerds get their ultimate revenge. Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped into the mix as well in the summer of '87 with his classic portrayal of Dutch in Predator. Stanley Kubrick gave audiences his war epic Full Metal Jacket, and that's just to name a few of the many films that were released during this summer that would go on to be lasting hits over the years. However, among all these blockbuster movies was a law-abiding cop that would battle one of the summer's biggest characters at the box office on July 17th, 1987. This weekend would see the release of Jaws 4: The Revenge and RoboCop from director Paul Verhoeven. RoboCop would win the battle at the box office with a little bit more than $8 million during its opening weekend, which I certainly think is a win to be proud of, even though the great white shark with a grudge against the Brody family was certainly dwindling in cinematic gravitas by the time Revenge would hit cinemas. RoboCop would go on to gross around $53 million domestically on just a $13 million budget, so it certainly was a success for something considered much more niche than mainstream at the time. From there, RoboCop would become a pop culture icon, and the decades after this movie's release, this film would spawn sequels, comics, toys, a crappy reboot, video games, cartoons, you name it, RoboCop had it. So let's get into it. Let's stop the jibber jabber. Let's get into 5 things that I think make this film great, starting with the dystopian Detroit setting.
Today, labor leaders agreed to sanction construction of OCP's Delta City, thereby creating an estimated 1 million much-needed new jobs, despite questions about workers' safety in dangerous old Detroit.
Now, every hero needs a city or a home to clean up and keep safe. Batman has his Gotham, Superman has Metropolis, and RoboCop has Detroit. Set in the near future, this version of Detroit is conveniently on the verge of lawlessness and in desperate need of a hero, just like RoboCop. It's a hyper-realistic world that resonates with us because there are many parallels in it to our own society. Corruption is rampant, mega corporations are in control, these elements of capitalism and privatization are prevalent in the world of this film. We see how greed has taken over, leading to people either being rich or poor with no real middle class. And I absolutely love how the movie weaves all of this into its storyline through advertisements in the backdrops, through capturing the tone shaping of the media coverage and its influence over public perception, to satirical commercials for comically absurd products. All of it creates a wildly unique but relatable reality for the setting of this story. All of which, of course, is the perfect cesspool for Officer Alex RoboCop Murphy to have to come in and clean up. The entire film just gives you a grimy sort of feel while you're watching it. It's perfect for the needs of the story, the design of the backdrops, the wardrobe, the lighting, the framing of the shots from Verhoeven. All of it creates a gloomy atmosphere. There's an uneasiness while watching, and that cinematic setting to me is the perfect first challenge for a hero. Next up, I would have to go with just the collection of villains that this movie provides.
Come on, man, let's smoke them! The wrecking crew is here! Where is that metallic mother?
Get that up! Nothing fancy. Just kill him.
Every hero also needs a villain, and RoboCop has a collection of them in this movie, all of whom sort of have their own reasons for wanting to rid Detroit of RoboCop. Too often in movies like these, I think the villains can be a bit too cartoonish. They may be able to deliver some menacing moments, but there really is never any doubt that the hero is going to prevail. But that wasn't necessarily the case with this movie. The bad guys in this film really do feel like the heartless and vile, dead-behind-the-eye predators they're framed as. Detroit is a city on the verge of lawlessness, and with characters like Clarence Boddicker, it's easy to see why. I think with this single performance alone, Kurtwood Smith, most known for his role as the family patriarch Red on That 70s Show, came in and created one of the all-time great 80s movie villains. Yes, Kurtwood Smith, with his average, middle-aged stature, thinning hair, drab attire, and glasses. He didn't have size, but that did not hinder him from creating a savage bad guy for RoboCop to have to deal with in his very first film. Smith as Clarence Boddicker had a grimy charm to him. He was sleazy, he was self-assured, he was relentlessly violent, all of which to me is the definition of just a nasty and wicked antagonist. I mean, we've seen 1,000 movie villains before who've all given the impression they enjoy the carnage and the killing, but Smith in this role truly captured that pleasure that he had for both evil and violence, and I think it makes him a cut above the rest. He was absolutely charismatic, he showed no fear to anyone, and as Boddicker, Smith just created a phenomenal villain, but he wasn't alone. He had his crew. They were just as menacing as he was. Ray Wise, Paul McCrane, and Jesse Goins are about as sleazy as a villainous crew can get. They all captured personas that just made them feel at home in this lawless Detroit city, and I think they were all perfect for their roles. In particular, Jesse Goins, who just delivered a laugh in this movie that was a little terrifying as a kid, simply just because of the violence that would be taking place when he was cackling it up. This crew was absolutely vicious. Boddicker was as their leader as well. However, him and his henchmen were not the only unsavory individuals roaming about in this movie. We also get Ronny Cox as Jones. He's slick, he's established, he's also vile and unrelenting when it comes to getting what he wants. There's a aged wisdom and a confidence to his character, and Cox delivers it all with a natural sleaziness. Cox really is able to deliver a stark intensity to his dynamic with Morton as their old versus young subplot evolves, plus with his financial capabilities you can actually feel a little bit of fear for RoboCop for when their paths do cross, with Jones having his own business reasoning behind wanting to rid Detroit of RoboCop. Next up, I would pick the storyline overall as being one of the great things about this film.
Come quietly or there will be trouble.
Now, we've already covered the settings and the villains and their impact on this story, but I think the plotline on its own, as an origin story for a hero, has a fantastic structure to it. We're introduced to the lawlessness of Detroit and the decline that it's taking. Then we meet a young cop named Alex Murphy. He's a little wet behind the ears, but he thinks he can make a difference. Once he's savagely attacked by Boddicker and his crew, he becomes RoboCop. From there, the story almost follows two distinct paths, one being the mission of RoboCop to find those responsible, which gives us our hero's first mission, but in doing so, that also explores the growth of Murphy as RoboCop, as the human qualities slowly take over the robotic ones, and that's something that I think gives this movie a little bit of heart that you don't often see in movies like this, particularly from the decade. RoboCop is half man, half machine, and as the human elements slowly take over and Murphy becomes to remember his past, you can kind of feel his pain with him. It creates a stronger emotional connection to the character. I also felt the progression of the corporate side of the story played out as a nicely timed parallel to RoboCop's mission. We see RoboCop learning about his past and tracking down Boddicker and his crew, but we also see the involvement of OCP and the police force, with Jones and Morton competing to implement their own cyborg designs into law enforcement. For them, it's just all about the money, and as the film progresses, waiting for these two story layers to collide is pretty compelling. You know Jones has it in for RoboCop because he's Morton design, and when you discover Jones is working with Boddicker, you instantly feel a little bit more fear for RoboCop. Something that I think is perfectly revealed later into the film to ramp up the already high levels of intrigue, and with all of these elements working as one, the result is a perfectly structured narrative that offers a surprising amount of rewatch value. In at number 4, one of the great things about this movie would have to be the practical effects. Despite being made decades ago, I think the visual appeal in this movie holds up great. I mean, sure, the stop motion work for the Ed 209 is dated, but I think it adds a bit of charm and nostalgia to just filmmaking of the era. Outside of that, though, the focus was practical, from the design of RoboCop to the makeup work to the old school stunt work and the over-the-top squibs. I thought all of it worked perfect for the tone of this movie. I mean, RoboCop got a remake in 2014, and despite the advancements of technology, the look of the reimagined suit was lackluster lackluster at best, looking nothing close to as polished as RoboCop's design from 1987, and sure, the original may have less detail to it, but at the same time it felt natural to the era and closer to something that was built as a prototype. From the movements to the curves of the steel, it was just the right type of industrial styling for this character. RoboCop takes on a ton of damage throughout the course of this movie, and it really shows on his suit of metal. I thought the designing of the damage was detailed. It just looked awesome as it led to seeing him shed his helmet to reveal the man that was still inside of this robot, and with the makeup work, seeing Murphy's face as RoboCop in this movie to me is still iconic. The violence overall in this movie was perfect for the needs of the story, but it wouldn't have hit at all with that same level of ghastly impact had it been computer generated. I mean, seeing Murphy being shot up from Boddicker and his crew was a scene that stuck into my head as a kid. It made the movie feel like something from the horror genre, and it's really a testament to the practicality of it all. Only that scene was nothing in comparison to Paul McCrane's character in the final act when he takes a brutal chemical bath. I mean, seeing his skin falling off has a silly charm to it as an adult, but as a kid it was kind of terrifying, and even watching now all these years later, it looks awesome, and it's just as tastefully disgusting now as it was back then. And overall, the visual styling in this movie is still fantastic today, even down to the excessively bloody squibs used throughout that do nothing but add to the wonderful hyper-violence that this movie ingrained itself with. And lastly, the final thing that I think makes this movie the all-time great one that it is, of course, would have to be just RoboCop himself.
Today, kids at Lee Iacocca Elementary School got to meet in person what their parents only read about in comic books.
Robo, excuse me, Robo, any special message for all the kids watching at home?
Stay out of trouble.
I don't really think there's any doubt that RoboCop himself is the best thing in this movie, from the design to his path in the story. He is the perfect hero, but Peter Weller in the role I think was a huge reason why he became such a lasting character in cinema, and why his origin story in this movie is one of the all-time greats. Because when you think about it, Weller only had a small amount of screen time as Officer Murphy, but with his natural energy and charisma, you almost immediately connect with him. Thus, when RoboCop starts out as nearly all machine with a lack of emotion, who, as the film progresses, begins to show signs of the human inside of that machine, you can instantly see the elements of Murphy's personality shining through. RoboCop is an officer dedicated to cleaning up his city and ridding it of crime, and in doing so, the guy dishes out some classic 80s one-liners that provide amusement while also solidifying everything about who this character is. This gave RoboCop a natural charm, something that complements both his moments of being a flat-out hero as well as his more vulnerable moments as he's remembering instances from his past. There's a human element to this character that just makes you love him. Conceptually, RoboCop is the perfect hero, and his origins in the first RoboCop film is as equally resonating as the character is himself. I think this is a perfect film for what it set out to accomplish, from the aspect of world building and vile characters to the perfectly structured plot progression and character growth from our hero. Nothing is really missing, and those guys are the 5 things that I think make RoboCop great. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, drop it a thumbs up, leave a comment below. I'd love to talk movies with you guys. Share it with your friends, and without question, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you can never miss a video. Here are some links to some recent reviews just in case you missed them. All my social media links and the link to our official website are down in the description below, and I'll catch you next time.